Hello and welcome back. In this lesson, I'm going to teach you the rules for using the 7 most important punctuation marks so that you can write correct English without making mistakes. There are exercises within the lesson to help you practice, and as always, there is a final quiz at the end of the video. So if you're ready, let's begin. We're going to start with terminal punctuation. Terminal means the end, so terminal punctuation marks are what we use to end a sentence. There are 3 of these: the period or the full stop, the exclamation mark, and the question mark. Let's look at the period first. This mark is called the period in American English. AME means American English, and it is called the full stop in British English. It is used to mark the end of declarative and imperative sentences. I'll explain. Here are some examples. I teach English. We had pizza for dinner last night. If it rains tomorrow, I'll bring my umbrella. These sentences are called declarative sentences because they declare something. They give us some information. And at the end of each sentence, you see a period or full stop. Imperative sentences are commands or requests. Please don't feed the animals. You might see this on a sign in a zoo. Let me know what time your flight arrives. If it rains tomorrow, bring your umbrella. Let's now turn to the exclamation mark. It is used to convey strong emotion or feeling. Have a look at these 2 sentences. Both of them mean the same thing. The first sentence, which ends in a period, has no special feeling or emotion. It's like saying, I'm really excited about my new job. Doesn't sound like I'm very excited, does it? That's why we use the exclamation mark. I'm really excited about my new job. It tells our reader to read the sentence with emotion. In this sentence, the emotion is excitement. This next sentence, if you come to work late tomorrow, you're fired. Imagine a manager saying this to an employee. So this expresses anger. In the same way, you can express many other feelings, including surprise, joy, fear, etc., using the exclamation mark. Now, both of these sentences are declarative, but you can also use the exclamation mark in an imperative sentence like this one. Johnny, don't play with your food. You can imagine a mother saying that angrily to her son. So it's a strong or strict command. Another place where we use the exclamation mark is after interjections. Here are a couple of examples. Ouch, you just stepped on my foot. Wow, what a beautiful house. Interjections are words like ouch and wow, which are used to express feelings. So remember, if you want to convey strong emotion in a sentence, put an exclamation mark at the end of it. If there's no special feeling, just end the sentence with a period. Okay, let's turn now to the 3rd terminal punctuation symbol, the question mark. It is used to mark the end of a question, so it's very straightforward. If a sentence is a question, then put a question mark at the end of it. Here are some examples. What do you do? Are we allowed to feed the animals? If it rains tomorrow, should I bring my umbrella? Are you excited about your new job? Who lives in that house? So the rule is, if a sentence is a question, it must end with a question mark. All right, let's do a small exercise now. There are 4 sentences on the screen. I want you to add periods or full stops, exclamation marks, and question marks where necessary. Stop the video, think about your answers, then play the video again and check. Okay, here are the answers. If you want, stop the video again, check your answers, then play the video and continue. Before we move on to the next topic, a quick note on spacing. Notice that there is no space between the last letter of a sentence and the terminal punctuation mark. If you put a space there, it's wrong. But when you begin a new sentence, you should leave a space after the terminal mark, and you should start the new sentence with a capital letter. Capital letters are called uppercase letters and small letters are called lowercase letters. Okay, now let's move on to the next topic, pauses. There are again 3 marks that fall under this category: the comma, the semicolon, and the colon. These are called pauses because they are used to tell the reader to stop briefly for a moment and then continue reading. Let's start with the comma. Yes, it's pronounced comma, not comma or coma, comma. This mark has 4 main uses. The first is to separate items in a list. For example, we need to buy milk, eggs, flour, and sugar for the cake. There are 4 items in this list separated by commas. Notice how when we read the sentence, we naturally pause after each item in the list: milk, eggs, flour, and sugar. The job of the commas is to show these pauses. Now, your English teacher in school may have taught you that it's wrong to put that last comma before and. But there's no rule about it. It's really your choice. You can include that comma or you can leave it out if you wish. I like to always put it there to avoid confusion. Now, if you only have 2 items, don't use a comma. We need to buy eggs and flour for the cake. But if you have more than 2, put a comma after every list item except the last. Also notice that there is no space before the commas, but there is a space after each one. This is the correct formatting. Please remember that. Here are 2 more examples. The car is spacious, stylish, and affordable. Why don't you go upstairs, take a shower, and get ready to leave? In this last sentence, the list items are not just single words, they're verb phrases. So this is the first use. The second use of the comma is to separate words that are not part of the sentence. Take this example. Unfortunately, he missed his flight. Here, the main sentence is he missed his flight. The word unfortunately is an extra. It just expresses my opinion about the sentence. This type of word is called a sentence adverb. Words like frankly, hopefully, sadly, etc. are some more examples. One more sentence. Frankly, I don't care whether she agrees with my decision or not. Here, frankly is the opinion word, the sentence adverb. In both of these examples, the comma helps to set the sentence adverb apart from the main sentence. Another form of extra information is forms of address, like names. Emma, can you come here and help me with this? Emma is a name. The words sir or madam are also forms of address. Sir, please have a seat. Ma'am, can I get you something to drink? Notice the commas after the name and after sir and ma'am. This brings me to an important point about formal letters and emails. In the salutation, that is in the greeting, we use dear. We say dear sir, dear madam, or dear sir or madam, or the name of a person like dear Sita. Should you put a comma at the end? Well, the answer is different for American and British English. In British English, you should always put a comma at the end. In American English, a colon should be used instead. In the closing, the most common formal expressions are yours faithfully, yours sincerely, and yours truly, which is a little less formal. But after all of these, you must always put a comma. This is true for both American and British English. The third use of the comma is to separate linking words like however, therefore, for example, in fact, of course, etc. These words connect one sentence to another sentence. Here are some examples. Her parents wanted her to be a doctor. However, she had other plans. This is a great book. In fact, it is one of the best I have ever read. In these sentences, the linking words however and in fact are at the beginning of the sentence, and there is a comma after them. But they can also occur in the middle of the sentence like this, and the meaning is the same. Now you see that we used 2 commas to clearly separate the linking words from the rest of the sentence. Sometimes the linking words can also occur at the end. In that case, 1 comma is enough, because the sentence then ends with the period. The fourth and final use of the comma is with clauses. What is a clause? A clause is just like a sentence. Here are two examples. We went to the beach last weekend. When Rahul gets home from work. Notice that the first one is a full, complete sentence. So this is called an independent clause. But the second one is not complete. If I say, when Rahul gets home from work, you will ask, okay, what does he do? So this is called a dependent clause. We need to finish the sentence by adding an independent clause. When Rahul gets home from work, he watches TV for an hour. That first clause, when Rahul gets home from work, is called dependent because it depends on the independent clause. He watches TV for an hour to be a complete sentence. The dependent clause is sometimes also called a subordinate clause, but it means the same thing. Remember, an independent clause is a complete sentence, and a dependent clause or a subordinate clause is not complete. It needs to be connected to an independent clause to be a full sentence. So now that you know the basics of clauses, let's talk about the correct use of commas with them. There are 6 sentences on the screen. Each sentence has 2 clauses, but there are no commas. I want you to just try the exercise. Put commas where you think they are needed. Stop the video now, think about your answers, then play the video again and check. Alright, let's discuss the answers. In the first sentence, there are 2 independent clauses. They offered him a promotion is the first one. He accepted it immediately is the second one. These clauses are independent because each one can be a complete sentence. Whenever you connect 2 independent clauses in the same sentence, you must put a comma after the first one. But that's not enough. You must use a word like and, but, or so to connect the clauses. These words are called coordinating conjunctions. Coordinating just means connecting. In this sentence, I've used and. Now, if you don't use a conjunction, it's wrong, and it's actually a common error called a comma splice. That's when you use just a comma to connect 2 independent clauses. So the rule is that when you want to connect 2 independent clauses using a comma, write the first clause, put a comma after it, and put the correct coordinating conjunction, then write the second clause. Here are some more examples. I waited for the doctor for over 2 hours, but she never came. We can go out for dinner, or we can just order in some Chinese. They've never been to Vietnam, so they're going there on vacation this year. In all of these, we have 2 independent clauses connected by a comma and then a conjunction. Exercise sentences number 2 and 3 deal with connecting a dependent clause to an independent clause. In number 2, we have a dependent clause first. If you study more, this clause is dependent because it is not complete. The second clause, your grades might improve, is independent. So here's the rule. If the dependent or the subordinate clause comes first, put a comma after it. In number 3, the first clause is independent. I was so happy. And the second clause is dependent. When I heard the news. So now the order is reversed. If the subordinate or dependent clause comes second, then you don't use a comma. So this sentence is correct as it is. No comma should be used here. Let's move on to the next 3 sentences. In these, we have a special type of subordinate clause, the relative clause, also called the adjective clause because it gives information about a noun. A relative clause is introduced by a relative pronoun, who, which, whom, that, or a relative adverb like when, where, or why. In sentence number 4, the relative clause is who won the Nobel Prize in Physics this year. It gives information about the noun scientist. That is, it tells us who that scientist is. Now, what happens when we remove this clause? That lady is the scientist. That lady is what scientist? I don't understand. So this relative clause cannot be removed from the sentence, and it is called an essential relative clause. Essential means it's very important. The rule is that we don't use commas with essential relative clauses. But in number 5, we have something different. There is a relative clause, which is the last day of the year. It gives information about New Year's Eve. But this clause can be removed. People love to celebrate New Year's Eve. The meaning is still clear. So this clause is called non-essential. It's not so important. It just gives some extra information. We separate non-essential relative clauses with a comma. Okay, what about number 6? Here we find a relative clause in the middle of the sentence, whom you met at the party. It gives information about Oliver. So let me ask you, is this essential or non-essential? It's non-essential because you can remove it and the sentence still makes sense. My friend Oliver just got a job at Apple. So we separate it from the rest of the sentence, but we use 2 commas this time because the relative clause is in the middle of the sentence. So these are all the rules for punctuating clauses correctly. Let's do another exercise now. This time, it's for all the uses of the comma. Stop the video, put commas in the correct places in these sentences, then play the video again and check. Okay, here are the answers. If you want, stop the video again, check your answers, then play the video and continue. Alright, the next mark in the category of pauses is the semicolon. This mark is used to combine closely related sentences. Here's an example. I went to see a movie with my wife. I thought it was amazing. She thought it was terrible. These 2 sentences are very closely related. I thought it was amazing. That's my opinion. She thought it was terrible. That's her opinion. So instead of ending a sentence and then starting a new one, we can do 2 things. We can either use the conjunction but. I thought it was amazing, but she thought it was terrible. In that case, we have 2 independent clauses, so remember that we need a comma between them. Or we can just use a semicolon. I thought it was amazing, she thought it was terrible. So we have combined the 2 clauses into a single sentence without a conjunction. But there are some types of linking words which we can use with a semicolon. These are called conjunctive adverbs. Words like however, therefore, for example, in fact, of course, etc. We discussed them in the section on commas. Do you remember these 2 sentences? Her parents wanted her to be a doctor, however, she had other plans. This is a great book. In fact, it is one of the best I have ever read. In both, we first have one sentence which ends with a period, then a new sentence begins with the linking words however and in fact. But there's another way to write these sentences. Instead of the period or the full stop, you can also use a semicolon. If you do that, the second clause should begin with a lowercase letter because it's now part of the same sentence. The meaning is still the same, but the semicolon makes the clauses look more connected. So remember that with conjunctive adverbs, you can either use a period to end the first sentence and then start the next one, or you can use a semicolon to combine the 2 independent clauses into one single sentence. As with the other punctuation marks we've discussed so far, we leave no space before the semicolon, but we leave a single space after it. Okay, now we move on to the last punctuation mark in the category of pauses, and that is the colon. The colon has one purpose: to introduce information after an independent clause. Here are 2 lists introduced by colons. Danny's Seafood Restaurant specializes in 4 items: prawn, shrimp, crab, and lobster. Whenever you drive, you must do the following: wear your seat belt, obey traffic laws, and keep your eyes on the road. The information that comes after the colon can also be a clause rather than list items. Let me make this very clear. If you fail another test, I'm taking away all your video games. I'd love to move to Japan, but there's one big problem. I don't speak any Japanese. In all of these examples, I want you to notice that before the colon, there is an independent clause or a complete sentence. This is very important. But notice what happens when we rewrite the first sentence like this. Danny's Seafood Restaurant specializes in prawn, shrimp, crab, and lobster. Now we cannot use a colon after in because up to that word, Danny's Seafood Restaurant specializes in, is not a full, complete sentence. It's not an independent clause. We can rewrite the other sentences as well. You see these on the screen now. If you want, stop the video and read them. So remember that we only use a colon after a complete sentence, also known as an independent clause. There is an exception though, and that is in titles and headings where we want to save space. In those places, you will see colons used after single words or phrases. In fact, you will see that in the headings in this lesson as well. But in general, use a colon only after an independent clause. When you use a colon, don't leave a space before it, but do leave a space after it. All right, it's time for another exercise now. There are 5 sentences. In each one, I want you to add commas, semicolons, and colons wherever necessary. Stop the video, think about your answers, then play the video again and check. Okay, here are the answers. If you want, stop the video again, check your answers, then play the video and continue. And finally, we move on to the last punctuation mark in our lesson, the apostrophe. This is used for 2 purposes. The first is to mark contraction. Contraction is when we combine 2 words into a single word, as in these examples. I'm a teacher. She's waiting at the bus stop. He'd never take a bribe. Here we see I am shortened to I'm, that's the contraction. And then we have she's, which is she is. It can also be she has in a different situation. And he'd, which is he would here, but it can also be he had. And there are many other contractions in English. The apostrophe is used to indicate that certain letters have been omitted or removed to make the contraction. So always check to make sure that you are putting the apostrophe in the correct place. For example, Pedro does not like the idea. We can shorten does not to doesn't by removing the O in not. So we put the apostrophe in the place of the O. You cannot put it anywhere else. Another important thing with contractions is that you can only shorten and combine 2 words at a time and not more than that. Take this sentence. They are not coming to the party. So they aren't coming to the party is correct. The contraction is aren't, are plus not. They're not coming to the party is also correct. The contraction is there. They plus are. But you cannot write they'ren't coming to the party. That's not possible. In fact, it's wrong in speech as well. So remember, you can only contract 2 words at a time. This is the first use. The second use of apostrophes is to mark possession. Possession refers to ownership or relationship. For example, have you seen Anita's new car? It is my brother's birthday today. Forbes magazine publishes a list of the world's most powerful people. In these sentences, we have used apostrophes with the nouns Anita, my brother, and the world. But what do we do when a word ends in S already, like Thomas, boss, girls, or years in these sentences? In each sentence, there are 2 options. Which option is correct? Stop the video and think about it, then play the video again and check. Okay, notice that in the first 2 sentences, the nouns Thomas and boss are singular. In sentences 3 and 4, the nouns are plural, girls and years. In these last 2 sentences, it's pretty easy. Don't use the S. With plural nouns that end in S, only put an apostrophe. But in the first two sentences, both options are correct. This is because some writing guides say that with a singular noun that ends in S, you should write apostrophe S to make the possessive. Others say that you shouldn't use the S, just use an apostrophe. So there's no strict rule. It's up to you to choose which method you want to follow. But make sure that you pick one method and use the same thing throughout your writing. Now, another quick note on spacing. With the apostrophe, we don't leave a space before or after it, but if it comes at the end of a word, that is, if it's the last character in a word, we leave a space and then begin the next word. Okay, I want to alert you now to a common error with the possessive use of apostrophes. And it is with the possessive pronouns yours, hers, ours, theirs, and its. For example, that room is hers. Is this book yours? He is a friend of ours. Our car is more spacious than theirs. In these words, you must never use an apostrophe. The case of its is interesting because there are actually two words that sound the same. It's without an apostrophe and it's with an apostrophe. The word it's without an apostrophe is the possessive pronoun. For example, the dog wagged its tail, meaning the tail of the dog. The company is planning to expand its operations in Asia. That means the operations of the company. It's with the apostrophe is a contraction of either it is or it has, as in it's time to start the meeting. That means it is time to start the meeting. It's been a while since we spoke, meaning it has been a while since we spoke. So make sure to remember this difference between them to avoid mistakes. All right, that is the end of apostrophes. And now if you're ready, it's time for the final quiz to test if you can use all of the 7 punctuation marks that we have discussed correctly. There are 8 sentences on the screen, and there are many punctuation mistakes in them. In each one, I want you to identify and correct the punctuation errors. Stop the video, do the exercise, then play the video again and check. All right, here are the answers. How many did you get right? Let me know in the comments below. If you like this lesson, give it a thumbs up by hitting the like button. If you're new to my channel, make sure to click that subscribe button and that little bell icon next to it to get my latest lessons right here on YouTube. Happy learning, and I will see you in another lesson soon.